Massive Big 12 news dropped yesterday. BYU quarterback Jake Retzlaff is entering the transfer portal. How does this affect Utah and BYU in 2025? We're going to discuss on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen and view of the day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get your podcasts as well as on YouTube. If it's your first time joining the show, make sure you like and subscribe. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. You can download the Game Time app and create an account. Use code LOCKEDONCollege, all caps, no spaces, for $20 off your first purchase. My name is JT Wistrcill, and on today's show, we're going to be talking about the fact that the Big 12 is not doing a media poll this year and why I just think that's weird. Then we're going to talk about if Rice-Eccles Stadium is still the best college football atmosphere the Big 12 has to offer, if it's still the toughest atmosphere to win in as well for rival teams. But we have to start with the massive news yesterday that was first reported by local BYU reporters, and then slowly but surely it trickled its way to ESPN, where ESPN College Football, Pete Thamel, reported it too, where he said BYU, this comes to us from ESPN College Football's Twitter account, BYU quarterback Jake Retzlaff is planning to transfer from the school. Sources confirmed to ESPN on Sunday. He is facing a suspension after admitting to premarital sex, a violation of BYU's honor code that surfaced during his response to a civil lawsuit coming from 2023. So this has been we didn't know what was going to happen with Jake Retzlaff. That we haven't really touched on this a ton, and Jake Hatch has done a great job reporting on it for Locked On Cougars. But yeah, he was hit with this civil lawsuit, and it was kind of hanging up in the air about, hey, what's going to happen? What's the timeline for this, of when it will all get ironed out, what's going to come out of this? We were in kind of sit and wait mode, and BYU was too, right? They said that they weren't going to say anything about it, but what did come out in Jake Retzlaff's response to the civil lawsuit was what I just mentioned. He admitted to having premarital sex, and that is a violation of BYU's honor code. So it has now been widely reported that he was going to be suspended 7 games on the season. That's barring if he would have even been able to play this season. So either way, he was going to hit the transfer portal, which Alex Markham, friend of the show of Utah Rivals, even reported that, and I've seen some other people talk about that he did reach out to Utah about coming here. That deserves its own. We could talk about that tomorrow, just how crazy that possibility even is. But yeah, obviously this is a massive blow to BYU, and being as they are our direct rivals, this is massive for Utah, because to me, when you lose your starting quarterback and now the next 2 quarterback commodities that the BYU Cougars are going to be swapping in there are P4 unknowns for the most part. Like I should say, they have not experienced success on the P4 level. To me, this does take BYU out of contender status, at least right now in the Big 12. And it didn't seem like, as we talked about, that it just based on how things were playing out, Retzlaff was likely to be able to play the season. And even if he had missed 7 games, it just, to me, you can't lose your starting quarterback and then be projected or just predicted to win the conference. Like, to me, that automatically knocks you out. And, some people could say, JT, what about what Cam Rising did a couple years ago when Utah started 1-2? Or what about even last year when ASU came out of nowhere and Sam Levitt was an unknown? Like, those are absolutely true points. But when we're just trying to look ahead to the season, say like, hey, what's the most likely outcome? It's that BYU is not a top 5 team in this conference. This is a BYU team that also was barely squeaking by some games last year, right? And credit to the Cougars for finding ways to win. But if we're also just looking at how BYU won, I've talked about this on my show. Like, when you have success in 1-score games, there is a track record, a mathematic equation that more times than not, when you do that one year, that does not translate to the next. And we see teams take a step back. So I've talked about on the show, Utah, Kansas, very likely teams to bounce back to me, because even though their record wasn't great, you watch those games and you look at them and you're like, oh, they're not that far off. They need the right quarterback, and they'll be right there. Versus you look at a BYU needing obviously a controversial penalty to help them beat Utah. How about the Oklahoma State game? That was one of the worst teams in the Big 12 last year, and you let them come into your home and you barely beat them as well too. There were several games last year for the Cougars, and they proved they were a really good team last year. But doing that again, and now without your starting quarterback, is going to be, just incredibly tough, and I personally don't see it. I like McKay Hillstead. I got a chance to call his high school games. I'm blanking on the other quarterback that they brought in a transfer now. I think Hillstead's going to end up being the guy to start there, and I think he's good, but I just don't see that instant translation of success. Retzlaff came through in some big moments for them, and They don't have a guy who was able to do that now. Retzlaff last year threw for over 2,900 yards, 20 touchdowns, threw 12 INTs too, but 61 QBR. And I did not think he was a top 5 quarterback in this conference, but he was a good player. And he was a guy who you could obviously win games with. I think BYU proved by the end of the Big 12 run last year that they were the second best team in this conference, with their only other conference loss. Oh, they did lose to someone else. I'm just blanking on who the other one was, but they lost at ASU was the big one that knocked them out of the Big 12 title game contention. So, and obviously losing at ASU is there's no shame in that loss. So it was a good BYU team, and it still could be. They're returning a lot back, but they don't have their quarterback. And what is the most important position in this sport? It's quarterback. Also a quarterback who, went through, I'm trying to remember my timelines and everything now, but I do believe he went through spring ball and everything too. So even those other guys were getting second team reps. Hillstead's been in the program for a little bit now, but Retzlaff was going to be the guy. He was going to be the starter. I'm not saying he was great at times. I felt like he held this team back last year, but it's hard for me to look at BYU and go, hey, this is a Big 12 contender without the guy that we at one point projected to be their starting quarterback. So to me, I just don't see BYU contending. And to me, I would favor Utah as we sit here right now going to BYU in the preseason rankings, right? Like a lot of people are going to have BYU over Utah, and that's understandably so. But now I look at that game where Utah has to travel to down to Lavelle Edwards Stadium, and I look at this and I go, okay, I think Utah should win that game. I think they will win that game. I think Devin Dampier is going to be a difference maker. We did a show earlier this year comparing Retzlaff and Dampier, who's the better quarterback. And I said, if you want to sit here right now and tell me, hey, based on his track record at the P4 level, Jake Retzlaff's a better quarterback, I get that. That's fine with that. But I've always felt that by the end of this season, we'd be talking about Devin Dampier as a better player. And I already obviously feel that Devin Dampier is better than McKay Hillstead. Dampier led the 4th best offense in the country last year. He rushed for over 1,000 yards. He led the country in yards per carry when he did decide to take off and scramble. He threw for over 2,500 yards. He's going to make another growth as a passer. He's not, look, obviously the athletes will be better. So some of that, he'll be sacked like maybe a few more times with the offensive line with how good it is too. I look at Utah, a team that's lost to BYU a couple years now. It's going to be led by this strong offensive line, Devin Dampier, Jason Beck's offense that was 4th in yards per game in the country. And I do think this is a Utah team that is going to go down to Provo and get a big win. But yeah, the biggest takeaway from Retzlaff transferring out and not being involved in the Cougars from a Utah perspective has to be that I look at Utah and I think they should be ranked higher than BYU too to me. I just don't see this Cougars team doing what they did last year. We'll see if they can come together and do it all again. But yeah, massive bombshell news that dropped on Sunday about Jake Retzlaff officially transferring out after violating the honor code, would have been suspended 7 games. So he is not going to be the quarterback at BYU, and Utah and BYU's rivalry will change because the Cougars' projected starting quarterback is no longer there. So as I said, I believe Utah is going to win that game against BYU. So we're going to talk about on another show, Jake Retzlaff apparently trying to transfer to Utah. That would have been crazy. But I want to talk about just Rice-Eccles Stadium. And this is the time of year where we're looking ahead and there's lots of lists coming out and people are saying that Rice-Eccles Stadium is the toughest venue to play at in the Big 12. I obviously agree, but after what they went through last year, I understand if people don't. I'm going to tell you why I believe Utah is still the most difficult venue to play in the Big 12 in one moment. But first, today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by our great friends at Game Time. We've all been there, logging on early and waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only lose your spot for a show you've been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That's where Game Time comes in. Game Time makes getting concert tickets faster and even easier. Prices actually drop as you get closer to showtime, and you can save up to 60% off with their killer last-minute deals. Are you tired of just the endless scrolling trying to find the best deal? Game Time Zone Deals pick the best seats in your section for you. Have you ever wondered what your view will actually look like before you buy? The app shows you a panoramic seat view, so there are no surprises. With Game Time, the prices you see is actually the price you get. No hidden fees. Also, that Game Time guarantee, which has your back with cancellation, protection, and more. You can take the guesswork out of buying concert and show tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege, all caps on those spaces, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, the lowest price with Game Time is guaranteed today. Is Rice-Eccles Stadium the most challenging venue to play at in the Big 12 still? I do believe it is, and I am not the only one, as a recent list was revealed by the CFB Kings account on X, in which they said the top 5 home field advantage in the Big 12 heading into the 2025 season. Number 5, they had Kansas State. Number 4, Texas Tech. Number 3, LaVell Edwards Stadium. Number 2, Oklahoma State. And number 1 is still Rice-Eccles Stadium. And I understand why some people could look at that and go, well, you lost to Arizona at home, you lost to TCU at home, you lost to BYU at home. Like, obviously Utah struggled at home last season. But when you are evaluating the toughest venue to play in, I think you have to look beyond last season and look at the totality of what this Utah team has done. As long as I've been hosting the show, we've been talking about how challenging Rice-Eccles Stadium is as a venue to come in and play in. And the numbers supported that coming into, even we can just look back to what Utah was in the 2023 college football season, right? If you look at the best home field advantages entering the 23 college football season, Utah had won 14 games in a row at home. Alabama had more at 20 at the time, then Georgia, then Michigan, then Utah 14, then Tennessee was there at 9. Obviously, Utah would go on to lose against Oregon, but that would be their only home loss this season. Let's also remember what the Ducks were. The Ducks would have been a force to be reckoned with in the current 12-team format. Instead, they lost 2 games. You know who they were to? A Washington team that made the national championship game. So, to me, your only loss was to Bo Nix. Oh, and what else happened in the 23 season with Utah? You had a backup quarterback the whole season once again, yet you continue to find ways to win. Cal, Arizona State, Florida, all just statement wins for this Utah football program, where these programs come in and you're Utah and you're down your, at the time, projected starter, well, before we knew how bad the injury was, in Cam Rising, and you just find ways to win. And that's a testament to this program. Was Utah able to do that last year? No, because honestly, Bryson Barnes was a much better backup quarterback than Isaac Wilson was. We can look at the difference in their play, and you see that's pretty evident overall. So, yeah, Utah took a step back with not great quarterback play. Their quarterback development cost them because they did not have another adequate backup after they not just even lost Barnes, but even Nate Johnson, who they were obviously able to do some things with. They beat UCLA that 23 season with Nate Johnson at quarterback. Johnson going down, getting them the dub at Baylor, but yeah, Nate, last year, Brandon Rose showed some things, but then he gets hurt in that BYU game. So Isaac Wilson was the guy for the most part, and he just wasn't able to deliver. And that was the biggest reason that Utah struggled at home last season, was, to me, bad quarterback play. Yeah, I didn't think the play calling was always great. I talked about receivers not always separating. We've talked about the interior offensive line not always living up to their end of the bargain, with Utah's 2 tackles being absolute beasts on the edges. But to me, the biggest reason was still quarterback play. And you can look at these games too, all the ones I just mentioned that Utah even lost last year, right? You look at an Arizona game, you look at a TCU game, and all of those games were 1-score games in the fourth quarter. Like Utah's defense, which did finish second in the Big 12, holding teams to under 23 points per game a season ago. Like, this is a stout defense, and that did enough to give this offense a chance to win. Unfortunately, the offense didn't do enough. And part of the reason the defense was still really good last year, even though they, bended, but they would bend a lot. I remember there were lots of long drives, but teams would stall in the red zone. The TCU game, there were some turnovers, some missed field goals in that game, I remember too. One of the reasons that Utah's defense was still really good at home last year, not just because of the players, but is also just because of the factors that make Rice-Eccles Stadium one of the best and most difficult venues to play at in all of college football. What happens when you come out to Utah? You play in altitude, and if you are not from altitude, that is a challenge. And I think that's something we see a lot as teams struggle in the altitude, because what happens is you get tired, you get fatigued, and when you get tired and fatigued, you know what happens? You make mistakes. And then when you make mistakes and you can't execute at a high level, that other team that is used to playing in that environment, they're going to capitalize on said mistakes and they're going to crush you. And we saw that a lot with this Utah team where, hey, this offensive lineman, heck, how about we talk about mistakes? How about penalties? Oh my gosh, the amount of false starts we see from opposing teams in Rice-Eccles Stadium because offensive linemen get tired. And what else is it also? Not just are you fatigued and tired from the altitude and going against a physical Utah team that has a physical brand of football, which is also always tough to win at a team with that type of a brand at home. You're also dealing with, I forgot the capacity of Rice-Eccles off the top of my head, but I think it's 70,000 plus. So 70,000 plus crazy, diehard, passionate fans screaming at the top of their lungs, trying to rattle opposing teams, and that leads to communication issues. So all the time you see teams burning timeouts at Rice-Eccles Stadium. You see all the time teams, false start penalties, guys throwing their hands up, getting frustrated at each other because they're tired. They're trying to figure things out, what's going on too. But it's a great atmosphere to watch a college football game in, and it's a terrible atmosphere if you are an opposing team trying to come into and get a win, because it's going to be rowdy, it's going to be ruckus, and it's just going to be complete chaos, and you'll get tired. You're going to get tired and more fatigued. If you guys have ever gone out, like those of you live in Utah, right? Like you've ever been in Utah and then you go out of town and let's say you come back and you try to work out. Like I still remember the very first time I ever moved to Utah, and obviously you guys see me on the show, right? Like I'm not saying I'm a Division I offensive lineman, Division I player by any stretch of the imagination here. But I remember the first time I even went on a walk, right? And it's just like, whoa, like it's just a difference. So it does take time to get acclimated. And especially, I was even back in Utah recently. I did a hike, and that hike, it was just like by the end of it, I was exhausted. And back when I was in Utah, that was just something for me that was like, this was easy for me to do. But now it's like, I don't do this. I deal with this altitude every day, and it affects you. So when you get to that brink of exhaustion, like it does affect you differently playing in that type of altitude too. And we've seen this reflected way beyond the 23 season too. There was an old article posted on KSL Sports that I dug up too, starting in 2020 after their lone loss to USC at home, that was COVID anyways. And we just talked about the crowd atmosphere and all the things that make a home atmosphere special. Well, outside, yes, the altitude still factor, but the home crowd and how crazy, rowdy, all the stuff that factors in first. Expanding the search out of the past 5 years, Utah is a whopping 26-2 at home in Rice-Eccles Stadium, with the additional loss coming in 2018. Taking a closer look at the last decade, Utah has gone 47-14 at home, and they are 54-19 at home since moving to the Pac-12 in 2011. That is absolutely incredible. Once again, KSL Sports article that's posted there as well. So that's just an absolutely remarkable statistic that Utah was that strong at home. So they have a prolonged track record of getting wins. And who have they beaten in that time too? We mentioned a Florida, we mentioned a USC, we mentioned an Oregon. Doesn't matter if you're a big dog, if you're just a P4 team, or obviously the other group of fives, whatever it may be, you come into Rice-Eccles Stadium, good luck getting out with a victory, because that place is incredibly special and hard to win in and play. There's a reason that there is nothing like a Utah football game day experience in Salt Lake City. It's large part because of what you, the fans, are able to provide, but we also just see how well this team can perform. So I look at it like this so I still think Utah is the best home field advantage in the Big 12, the College Football Kings list, as we mentioned, they do too. If Utah has another down year like they did last year, you're going to see that list flip. But I don't think they're going to have another down year. I've said before, this team to me is going to finish in the top 4 of the Big 12. Do they get to the conference title game? I hope so, but I do think that this team's going to be a force to be reckoned with, especially at home. And they got some tough home games this coming season. Kansas State comes out, ASU comes out, Texas Tech comes out to open things up. All of those teams, to me, have a chance to be contenders in the Big 12 conference. So I do think that's something to keep in mind as well, too. But this Utah team is ready for that test of contenders, because when Utah's had their projected starting quarterback, they've been pretty dang good at home, as we mentioned. The only recent loss outside all the games they've lost the last 2 years has been without their projected starting quarterback. Now, granted, you have to make do. You should win those games. I'm not saying that to excuse Utah, but I'm just saying when the starting quarterback plays for Utah football, they're usually pretty good at home. And I expect that to be the same with Devin Dampier this coming season. I think he is going to be electric. I think even when Utah's offense stalls at times a little bit too, right? We've talked about Devin Dampier. It's going to take him time, I think, to grow as a P4 passer. I think he's going to play well at the start, but I've even said, to me, UCLA game, I'm probably going to project 2 interceptions out of Devin Dampier. I feel like that'll be a step up, a Bruins defense that I think is tough. I'd love to see him throw none, obviously, but I do think that it's going to be an incredible, daunting and challenging task for Utah to be playing that strong Texas Tech team, to go on the road to face UCLA. So I could see Devin Dampier turning it over a little bit, but either way, when he does turn it over and he makes a mistake, he is a incredible talent. We mentioned some of the stats and things he can do already, and he also performed well against P4 competition a year ago. So a natural guy ready to step up, reuniting with his OC. So even when the offense is taking some time installing, that Utah defense, I said slight step back, still expect to be top 5, and they have a good chance to be top 3. Once again, I have questions about the defensive line, but overall, it's guys who can get after it. They should be able to stop the run really well, too, with linebackers that can tackle strongly. I like the secondary that Utah's been able to build, especially the safeties. And then who's going to be able to get home one-on-one, and also what kind of blitzes can Morgan Scalley draw up too. So that's why I think this Utah team defensively is going to be dominant at home. And I think the offense, with that offensive line too, even when Dampier might struggle, that offensive line is going to do more than enough that helps Utah power through and prevail. So I do think that Utah bounces back in a big way. Right now, as we sit here, right, Utah has several games at home. I would say I could see Utah losing one game at home this year. As we sit here right now, just because of how tough some of those games are, I say Utah drops one at home, one on the road. And who knows, maybe they'll drop the two on the road and get back to winning their home ways. But I do think we will get back to thinking, and guess what? All the other Big 12 teams are going to lose a game or two at home as well too. It's a tough conference. There's tons of parity, and it's tough to win at home, and it's tough to win on the road too. I will say these are still strong teams, so it's still going to be a challenge if it's obviously a big advantage to be home. So do project Utah to use maybe one game at home, but I could very likely, I say it's more likely they go undefeated at home than lose 2 games at home this season. That's how I view it as we sit here rounding out the end of June. One thing, though, as we're talking about projections and predictions that we won't be able to talk about this year is an official Big 12 preseason media poll. So On3 is reporting, actually it was Brett McMurphy who had it originally, Big 12 coaches and ADs have decided to stop doing the conference's preseason media poll. Arizona State, which won the Big 12 championship, this comes to us from the On3 post, was selected dead last in 2024. And of course, they wound up winning it all. So my first reaction to this, I don't like it. We've talked before about on this show, like, do preseason rankings, and the Big Ten doesn't do one either, actually. SEC still does one. ACC still does one. Do preseason rankings carry major merit? Are they this massive thing? No. But I do think they're cool. Like, it's something that's fun each season to be like, oh, where are you projected to finish? They're fun talking points. Obviously, I host this show. Like, I don't know about you guys, but I look forward to seeing, hey, what does the rest of the conference think about? Whether it's, ooh, they're high on us, they think they're going to win it all, or it's like, hey, the disrespect. Arizona State, that was a massive thing for them last season, I'm sure, in their preseason camp and everything. Kenny Dillingham, every coach's love to go. Kirby Smart is the king of the mental gymnastics for the everyone doubted us. Like, you have to find ways to find motivation. Kenny Dillingham didn't need to do that. He could just pull up the conference site and go, look what they think of you. They think you're the worst team in the Big 12. Let's go shut them up. They did exactly that. Won the whole dang conference. I think that's cool that the conference provides that type of thing and that it could lead to that type of motivation. Like, that's just something that's always has been. Who cares if sometimes by the end of the year, and oftentimes it does, we look dumb and stupid for like what ends up coming to fruition, right? Like, I didn't vote in the Big 12 preseason media poll last year, but I'm sure the people who did, they ended up looking back on and being like, oh, that Utah team, which I mean, obviously I am a part of that. I thought this Utah team was going to be pretty dang good a season ago, because if we look back at last year's Big 12 preseason media poll, it was Utah, Kansas State, Oklahoma State, Kansas, and Arizona as the top 5. Only Iowa State really lived up to their end of the billing, with Iowa State being ranked 6th and getting into the conference title game. You had ASU down at 16. Colorado was 11. Even a BYU was 13. All those teams, of course, vaulting up to the top, with Utah, Oklahoma State in particular, nosediving. Same with Arizona. Kansas State, middle of the pack. Kansas was bad as well, too, with a couple of big wins late. So, yeah, obviously they got it wrong with the Big 12 preseason media poll last year, but I think it's cool to talk about and to see that list and compile everything. So I am disappointed that they're doing away with it, because it was always just a fun talking point too. And I think it would have been great motivation for Utah this year. Now, granted, there will be tons of other Big 12 preseason media lists. Like the Locked On, we are doing our own preseason Big 12 rankings. So there's still going to be tons of preseason rankings the teams can pull from, but I don't know. I just, like I said, to me, honestly, it does seem a little soft, like just that the conference isn't doing it just because it's fun. Like, it's like, who cares if it looks bad, if it looks wrong? Like, I know it's hard to rank teams and you don't want to disrespect anyone, but those what rankings are. You're doing, your job is to project and predict what the conference finish will look like to the best of your ability. And just to be like, well, I don't want to do it because we got it so wrong last year. Or, oh, it's never that accurate. It's like, no, it's fun to talk about and discuss. Is it meaningless in the grand scheme of things? Of course it is, but I like it. I just think it's cool that it's a point that we can talk about, discuss. It's cool to see where the coaches and the schools, like how they view each other, what they think of you. It leads to that motivation as well. If you are projected to finish the top team, it paints a target up top, which obviously is nice if you're an underdog, but even if you're the top team, like Utah was a couple years ago when you had USC picked to win the Pac-12 and Utah ended up making the championship game and beating them, that was a cool thing for Utah to basically live up to those expectations, even though they weren't projected to win it, to be one of the 3 ranked teams. If you win it as one of the 3 ranked teams, like you did you did a preseason poll and one of your top 3 wins it, you should feel like you got it right. It's very hard to project the winner. So I'm like I said, to me, it's a bummer. I don't know why. I don't think they should stop doing it. I enjoy the preseason poll. I think it's something that's fun. We look to like, oh, this so-and-so. I don't think like that should be some crazy thing. Like if, let's say, Cam Rising was projected as the Pac-12 player back in the year, like the preseason one, that shouldn't be tout. If the athletic department website wants to tout it, sure. Like Cam shouldn't celebrate that or anything. He shouldn't pay any mind to that. Honestly, the teams probably shouldn't in general outside of when they're disrespected. But first of all, also, these guys always do look at it. That's the other thing that's funny, right? Is we act like, oh, they shouldn't pay any attention. They always pay attention. They're always watching. They always know. You hear it one way or another because a family member, a friend, someone, we're in the social media era. When things are said about you, one way or another, it gets back to that guy. Guys can say they stay off it and they avoid that stuff. Usually that noise tends to creep in and something ends up coming out. So I always think that's funny when guys are like, oh, I didn't see that or I didn't pay any attention to that. It's like, I think you probably did, but that's the funny world we live in. So yeah, wish they did Big 12 preseason rankings. I think it's a bad look for the conference just to not do it a year. They got it so wrong too, but either way, there will be tons of preseason rankings and lists we can react to. As I said, Locked On, we are going to do our own, and I look forward to that. And we're actually going to do a show, talk about preseason expectations here in the near future, talk about like, hey, is it good to have them? Is it bad? Like what can kind of lead and come out of all of that. Look forward to talking about that on a future Locked On Utes. But that is going to do it for our episode today. Drop your thoughts below on what you think about Utah-BYU now that Retzlaff will be transferring. Do you think Rice-Eccles Stadium is still the best home atmosphere in the Big 12? And what would be your personal Big 12 preseason rankings too? I'd love to see it and read and go back and forth in the comments as well too. Appreciate you guys as always for listening. If you are in the market for a second listen today, because we do appreciate making us our first listen here at Locked On Utes. For a second listen, make sure you check out the Portal Show. Brian Smith has the latest rumors, portal entries, and signings. Be the most informed fan on the rapid changes to college football's landscape. Find the Portal on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast today. That's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Utes. We hope you'll join us again tomorrow as we talk about the latest in Utah football, Utah recruiting, and Utah athletics.